Welcome to Tech in the Right Direction, the podcast. Let's take tech in the right direction to drive social change and close the employment, pay, and culture gap for women in technology. This podcast is focused on helping turn ideas into action and create opportunities for women to advance in the dynamic technology industry. I hope this podcast will inspire and motivate you to encourage more women and girls to seek or grow a career as a woman in technology. Stories about the journey of amazing women in the tech field starts right now. Welcome to Tech in the Right Direction, the podcast. This week I'll be speaking with Susan Sanders. Susan currently is the CEO of Spinderock, helping customers expertly engineer and sustain the employee experience, harnessing workplace technology. Susan's experience includes 15 plus years in the trenches alongside senior HR, IT, and communications execs working to improve the employee experience, including 8 years at Willis Towers Watson and 3 years leading Balaku, a communications technology startup. Susan is passionate about enabling inclusive, compassionate, and sustainable workplaces where both the employee and the businesses thrive. 5+ years building solutions that leverage Microsoft 365, 20+ years as an employee, and a lifetime of experience as a human. Susan is a member of the People's Intelligence Alliance, BARC, and is on the advisory board for the IAMCP Tech Equity Committee. She's also an avid sailor and an advocate of women and adaptive sailing. She earned her MBA from Arizona State University. Welcome to the show, Susan. I'm so excited to have you on.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Sure. So, Susan, can you share your career journey with us and tell us how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So I actually started in HR. I didn't start in technology. There wasn't a lot of opportunities in that time. Started in HR just as HR technology was starting to emerge. And I discovered I had a real knack for it. I was creating apps for different managers using compensation in one of my first jobs, using Excel. And then later at the Dial Corporation, we had this desire to have a website for HR. So I taught myself HTML and created the first HR website, and working with a developer, created the first benefits enrollment system, which was really exciting. I don't want to give the exact year because then I would date myself. But in that moment, I decided I liked technology way better than I liked HR. So for the past 20 years, I started being an intranet consultant and have basically stayed in that space during that time. And I've built and designed solutions, so I have some coding experience. I've sold software, I've consulted around it, implemented software. But then over the last 5 years, I really made the shift to think more about this as creating better employee experiences. So at one point launched a tech company focused on how to better communicate with employees with an application that could be embedded in SharePoint. And then just last year decided I really wanted to think more broadly, have more impact, helping companies really thrive through that better experience, but tying that to business outcomes. So that's where I'm at today, and just fully consulting and helping organizations with that prospect.
That's a great journey. So, a couple questions for you around that.
Yes.
So, you said you taught yourself HTML. How did you do that? How did you decide you were going to do that? What was that aha moment that said, I want to learn more about technology? Was there like a moment that you can remember, or did it just happen?
Well, I know that when I first discovered I had a knack, I was sitting at an IBM PC and there was a dot. And back in the day when you would run a software application, you had to know a string of code just to make the application run. And there wasn't all these great interfaces. So I knew I had an aptitude for that. And as the internet was taking off, and I was quite enamored with that, and the prospect came up with, well, what if we had a website where we could put all of our content and benefits information, and employees could just get on that? What would that look like? And I'm like, well, I'm sure I could figure that out. I don't remember exactly how I taught myself HTML. I'm sure there was something on the internet. I probably
Mhm.
bought a book,
Mhm.
but I just did it, and it came quite naturally to me to have some kind of language. And I really loved it because I could do it and see a result versus
Mhm.
trying to describe some kind of outcome and tell that to the person that was going to develop it. So I got to
Wow.
experiment a lot in those days
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Now, I know your current business and what you're doing now is to create better employee experiences. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, it's interesting because that word gets bantered around a lot, and I
Mhm.
think there's a lot of definitions of that. But I'm first helping companies maybe have a mind shift around what we mean by employee experience. That it's not just the digital experience. It's just not when they have a problem and they call for customer service support. It's not making sure you have free food, foosball tables. There's that part of the experience that came out of Silicon Valley. It's really the combination of all that. And it's also more deep, especially in today's world where that employee experience affects things like mental well-being.
Mhm.
It affects things like whether you're going to stay at that company or not. Gives employees an opportunity to feel like they have impact. And so when I work with companies, and while there's still a technological element to it, because everything today is enabled by that technology, it's a focused on the experience first. And how can we create better workplace experiences where employees feel like they belong and feel respected and engaged, and the company is thriving as well? There's a perspective that I bring to my customers, and then it varies based on the need. So it could be creating a new learning and development experience that really helps better foster that culture where employees want to learn and have the resources available and can really develop and grow inside the organization. Or it might be the broader employee experience, and how do you strategize and roadmap that so that over time you're really improving that for your employees. And then the underlying technology, most of what I do leverages Microsoft. So how do you then put that into play, and how do you execute that using these new guiding principles and using mostly technology you already have in place?
I think that's so great because, a lot of organizations kind of think just because you've given somebody new technology, they're going to adopt it and everything's going to be great. And that doesn't always happen, right? We do a lot of change and communication management as part of our training, but I think that experience is so important. So I love what you're doing there.
Yeah, very, very rarely do you put something in place and people just adopt it.
Right.
That whole, build it and they will come. It doesn't really apply in the
Right.
employee experience space.
Right. No, so true. So, as you know, this podcast is focused on bridging the employment pay and culture gap for women in technology. What are you seeing in the industry today?
Well, and Jennifer, I know you've seen these stats too, and the percentage of women in tech was relatively low and only got worse as a result of COVID.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, so we know that from the numbers, but I know that from personal experience too. So there isn't a time that I'm working with a client that I'm not involved with IT. It's just a part of what happens. And when I'm on the pure technical side, many times I'm the only female in the room. So you kind of get that sense that you're
Hmm.
a little outnumbered. And I've also been discriminated against, even as recently as 2018. I mean, it
Wow.
happened really early, when I was getting started, and you kind of get it. But in 2018, it was like, why we're not going to talk to her because she can't possibly know. We will only talk to this other gentleman. And it was like, I was dumbfounded that in 2018,
Mm-hmm.
um, I couldn't be recognized as being a technology expert.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think for a lot of women that discourages if you can't feel like you belong, if you're not seeing a lot of other women do those jobs, you don't identify with that. Um, Maybe it's not heavily promoted. I know there's a lot of efforts going on with STEM in terms of schools and things like that, but there's a lot of issues with that.
Mm-hmm.
However, I have hope because the work like Women in Cloud, the work that you and I are doing with tech equity through
Mm-hmm.
IAMCP, where we're really trying to focus on how to give women more skills to encourage them to come into technology, but also some of the role models we have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's so many more women in tech that I see, and I have so many great mentors in the industry that I feel this major shift, and that we have the momentum, and that through these efforts we can really start to turn that around.
I think you're 100% right. It's changing, but it's changing slowly, and it's a long way away. And role models, I think, is such a key piece, because we as women want to see other people in that role, so that we can imagine ourselves in that role. If we see men in the role, we are not going to be able to identify or, kind of think of ourselves in that role. So we need more and more women role models every day. And so that is so true. It's really, really critical for us to support and encourage and bring along women, bring their confidence to a level that they feel that they can do this, right?
Right. And I think not just that they can do it, but that they can be successful at it.
Mm-hmm.
So, the other part is that I think whether we're conscious of it or not, we want to see ourselves in a successful role. So, that's kind of where your eye goes. And I definitely see a shift in that, even with some of the tech startups starting to see a lot more women entrepreneurs, things like that. But I think it has to change. Like we want it to change. We want more diversity. We want more women in tech, but we need more women in tech. There's this other side of the future demands in the workforce, and every company is going to be a tech company in a certain sense. I mean, healthcare companies. I know, like Kaiser is a healthcare company out of Oakland, California, but they have an IT team that's over 5,000 employees strong, because they rely so much on technology to allow their healthcare workers and allow information to get to patients, all of that type of thing. It's become a center point of that organization. So more and more companies are going to be tech companies. The demands are going to increase, and that's going to be where there will be future success and where they're needed. And I think that there's easier for women today, but I don't think we can take it for granted. That just because it's shifting, to your point, it's kind of slow, right? Like it should be further along than it was, and we're not there.
Yeah, it's 2022 and we're still talking about moving it, right?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is I don't feel like, sometimes I forget that there's a difference. And I think that's because I happen to work with a lot of great men, where I forget that I'm an anomaly sometimes.
I feel the same way, yeah.
And it would be great if every woman felt that way, right? Like there is no difference. It's not exceptional to be a woman in technology. That's the goal.
Yeah. And inclusivity is so important today. Inclusion is so important today. And I think we are making a shift. I really see that. And, through collective efforts, we're going to get there. We can't do it by one person. We all need to do a little bit, and it moves the needle, but we've got to keep moving it continuously. And I think the biggest part is to build our pipeline for the future. So to encourage girls at an early age to start thinking about science and technology, so that they're interested in it and they're aware of it. If we wait too long, and usually the window is 8 to 13, if we wait till after that, we're not going to get their buy-in, and we're going to end up at the same place we are today.
Right. I do agree. And it's a concerted effort, because I think there's still to this day so many influences at that age that they, like the thought of being in tech might sound boring or geeky. Like there's still a little bit of that rhetoric out there. And so it does require diligence in order to inspire that generation to really get involved with this.
Yeah, no, that's true. So let's talk about leadership in tech. So do you think it takes to be a great leader? And then what are some of the challenges you've overcome in your career that we can learn from?
I mean, so leadership is a really hot topic right now, and what makes a great leader. Certainly the very obvious things like empathy. And I like how Satya talks about it, because it's not empathy like warm, fuzzy empathy. It's about just understanding where your customer or your employees or whoever it is, where they're at. And I see so many leaders as I work in these different organizations that are so out of touch with their, with employees, that they're probably not even understanding that there is an issue, much less what are the underlying issues of why they might not have the right representation of women in tech in their organizations. The other thing I think it takes to be a great leader, and I think just a great individual, is curiosity and that willingness to think you don't know it all. It's something I talk about a lot around expertise in today's world, that if you're out there today and you say you're an expert, you're probably not, because the world has changed so much that what worked 3 years ago doesn't necessarily apply today. So that idea that we need to be open-minded and be willing to pivot, be willing to rethink things, be willing to recognize new forms of expertise, and in order to make good change and to move forward. So I think those are two key things to be a savvy leader, is not to be so embedded in your own knowledge and not to get out of touch with the people that are in your organization and in your community as well.
I love what you said about curiosity. And if you think you're an expert, you're probably not. I immediately thought about the cloud.
Right.
The cloud is changing on a minute by minute basis, not even 3 years ago or 6 months ago. So our poor instructors, when they teach, they can look at the lab environment the night before, get ready, get prepared, and they come in the next morning and it looks completely different. So you have to have that open mind. You have to have that curiosity to say, oh, it was here. Where did it go? How do I get to it? And how do I make this all happen smoothly for my students, So it is so critical to have that open mind today. So well said.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm imagining that just in learning in general, how do we focus that towards leaders? Like there's, as all these things change, they need to be learning consumers as well.
And there's a whole personality piece in there. Like some people, they want to be the expert and they're going to say, I'm the expert. I know what's going on. And that might be true for, maybe a month ago. And I always say what I know today makes the decisions today, but I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So I can change my mind because I have new set of data at that point.
Right. That's a great perspective. I love that.
All right. So any challenges that you can think of that you've overcome in your career that maybe could be a learning lesson for us, for our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, one was, I feel like at one point in time, I was that person that wanted to be the expert and be recognized at it, even though I've always been, pretty good at being a change agent. There's still some ego, right? And so just remembering that to listen to others, because you don't know it all either. So like listen to your own lessons. I'm trying to think, standing up for myself a little bit more. I know that I have no regrets, but there are times where you have to have the tough conversations and be really aware of what it is you want to accomplish and go for that. And I think from time to time, I let things happen, or I stuck around with something too long and never really took my own interests and well-being to the forefront. Um, and it's funny because I feel like that's a recent thing that I've overcome. And a lot of that came about through Women in Cloud. And
Mm-hmm.
really interesting that you have this opportunity to do something and the outcome you expect isn't the outcome that you get. But it gave me a certain perspective to really define what I want to do and then make it very clear that that's what I wanted to do and that's who I am, and not to pivot from that. And then that attracts the people that you need to be in your circle to have better collaboration, to have more business, to just have a happier day when you come into work.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's another big challenge. Only recently have I overcome, but just have really seen a lot of benefit from that.
That's great. That's great to be able to, I would say 90% of people don't know who they are and don't know what they want.
Right.
A very high percentage. I was reading an article about this, and I was just shocked that, some days I think, okay, I know what I want. And then some days I'm like, I don't know where I want to go when I grow up. I don't know what I want to do.
It's so funny, Jennifer, because I've always felt like I never knew what I wanted to be when I grow up. So I guess I'm not quite grown up yet.
No, not yet. So, Susan, we're both extremely passionate about learning in the tech industry. I mean, we talk about that all the time.
Yes.
So, what do you think we can do to scale our efforts so that we can make a difference and see change sooner than later? And I know you're doing some of this stuff already. So, tell us some of the things that we can do together so that we can, see that difference.
Right. Well, one of the things I know we've talked about this is thinking about when we're talking about training, especially in the technology space. Um, like that, there's this underlying tech thing that doesn't always get covered. So there are a couple of ways that that plays out. One is like, how does a company do something in their organization versus how do you just use the software? So
Yeah.
piece of software. So, the idea of like how to take advantage of software, good examples and, illustrations and that kind of ongoing knowledge that might come and learning that comes from understanding the fundamentals of an application. But also, it was really interesting around like meeting people where they're at. So I was working with one of my clients, and I asked her she was showing me something on her screen. I'm like, well, just paste it in. And she said to me, how do I do that? And I said, oh, well, you just do Control V. And she put that in. She goes, oh, that's an awesome tip. And I'm like, you're welcome. I didn't make a big deal of it. And later she said, she thanked me because she said, sometimes, I just came back into the workforce and I was gone at a time where this started to be the normal thing where everyone had time to catch up on all of this. And now I step back in and I don't even know some of these really simple, basic things.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, thank you for meeting me where I'm at. So
I
I
love
think
that.
yes. And then, back to our original conversation of getting women in tech, like maybe getting women back into tech. That's a simple example. But when you think about coming into an organization, especially if you haven't worked in tech, like say you just came through a digital skilling program, what do you really need to know about using that technology?
Yeah.
And, not just the technology itself, but kind of what are the protocols and, maybe some Uber beginner type of courses. And then, the delivery of that as well with some of these new tools that are coming back. How can we leverage technology to better get learning in the flow of work?
You made me think of something in the technology field, and I never thought of this before, but I can see why women's confidence just gets diluted because in the technology field, we don't meet people where they are at. We always try to one up somebody, in
Mm-hmm.
an acronym and another language. And you're talking about all these things that mean nothing to most people. And we don't stop to say, let's clarify, let me tell you what this acronym means. We just don't do that in technology. And that's pretty intimidating.
Well, yeah, that, and if you step out to, because there was a time in my life and where I had to take a leave, an extended leave for like 9 months, and you step back in, and the world had changed. Like there were new apps, there were changes to the apps we already used, and so, and women tend to step out, like say it's for maternity or to care for, like we know that happens. Then how do they catch up? Because that new app rollout and implementation happened 9 months ago. It doesn't exist anymore. So how do we make sure that we're giving people the skills they need to be successful?
And technology keeps changing. So,
yes.
I mean, we're constantly, even in our workload, like it's amazing, like what happens from the time you sign off at 5 o'clock till the next morning, because there's emails going around, there's conversations happening. You can come in the morning and you can say, oh, you're talking about something that somebody is like, wait a minute, I was here the whole day yesterday, but
Right.
I don't know what you're talking about. And that happened to one of our employees many, many years ago. She said, I have kids, and, after 5, I can't sign on because it's just too hard for me. And I said, that's fine. You need that time. That's fine. And probably within a week, she started signing on after the kids went to bed, because she says, I don't want to be left out, because you guys are talking about stuff that I don't know anything about. And I've been at work every day.
Right.
So
it's not even months, it's hours. No.
Right. It's hours. Yeah.
So I don't know if that answered your question, because you talked about scale. So I don't know if that's a little bit different, where I was talking more about approach. So I wasn't for sure.
You said a couple things about, you said a couple things that I think will achieve scale. One is applying what you learn rather than just learning the steps, understand the why behind what you're learning rather than just the how. And I think that is huge in scaling efforts. If people can understand the why, then the how becomes so much easier. And we've had employees, early on, where they didn't understand the why, and they would do step by step, and they would just do that, and it didn't meet the criteria when the end result came out, because they didn't understand what they were doing that for. And so the why, I think, is critical, and that really helps us scale. Scale means like take it to a big level, take it out to market, evangelize it, let people all adopt it. That's really the change we want to make as a team, in the technology industry as women, so that we can put stuff out there that people just grab onto and adopt. And now we're going to see that change go viral, basically.
Okay, great. Yeah.
No, that's great. You did answer the question. And
okay,
great. And I love the meeting people where they're at, because people just don't think of that.
I mean, that just happened this week, and I turned that around and also said, and that's like how you can think about your learning and development program, because that's what the project was about. And so it's interesting how that like inspired her to think differently about like the content and how and who they needed to reach in the organization. So I took that away as a nugget. That's like a really important thing to remember, to meet people where they're at, because it's about, you're going to feel like you don't belong, and you're not going to feel success, like all those things. It's about, you feel like you belong when you contribute, when you're successful, and and you don't feel like you're out of place because you don't have some of those skills. I thought about how that's like a really powerful nugget, and that just happened this week. So
no, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. So what are 3 things you're extremely passionate about? So if you had to say, here's top things on my list, what would they be?
Well, obviously employee experience, but kind of more specifically, I set out the beginning of 2021 to focus on a couple of areas more specifically. And so within that space, mental health is really important to me. So, and I have a post that's coming out soon that talks about mental health in the workplace, and how it's not enough for companies just to provide services when things go wrong and to be supportive, but to look at their own practices that are actually contributing towards poor mental health. Workplace stress is like really high. People have issues with their managers. Those are things that are actually contributing to it. So there might be like fix yourself, don't try and fix your employees type of approach. And getting some of those messages out, because I see and have experienced myself some pretty detrimental, like gut wrenching, where I just lost, my own sense of worth. That's not what we want to generate, I think, as businesses for our employees. So that's one area. Sustainability is another area I'm actively engaged with, working with some radical collaboration group out of Denver, and thinking about sustainability, not just environmental sustainability, but more along the lines of not ERG, ESG standards. And this notion of, and I don't know if you heard me say in the beginning, but a great employee experience and great business outcomes. So, thinking about how like these win-win situations where employees win and the organization wins, and they become viable and sustainable. And they're viable in their communities as well. So sustainability models are important to me and underlie a lot of the work that I do with my clients as well. And then digital inclusion, which is a part about not just for women, but in communities that are disadvantaged. Like, how do we close that gap, not even just in the job market, but in general? And so I'm actively involved in a couple of different ways on digital inclusion. I just recently became the chair for Chicago at IMCP as the advocacy chair, which is deeply involved with Voices for Innovation, and also involved with Accelerate Chicago, which is a Microsoft program that's helping to get those communities more involved in digital upskilling. So I don't only just have a passion about it and talk about it. I'm trying to get involved in ways to have impact as well.
That's great. That is so great. Thank you for all your great work around that. So I love to travel, and I love to see different places, experience different cultures, really get into the places I'm at. So I love to ask this question. What is your most favorite place that you've traveled to, and why? And it doesn't have to be a glamorous place. It just has to give you a good feeling that I love this place. I want to come back.
Well, it's hard to pick just one.
One, I know. Top on your list, so that I can put it on my bucket list.
I kind of want to have a tie. I had the opportunity to sail around Croatia, on the islands of Croatia, which is beautiful and historic. It was on, with just a few of my friends, and it was also very freeing because we could kind of go places and just put out an anchor, and we didn't have to be in some busy port or something like that. And so it was kind of magical. But I think ultimately one of my favorite places, and I look forward to going back again and again, is Yellowstone. And I have been there, a few different times. And one was in spring, as the lakes were starting to melt and all the, baby animals were out. And then, just plus that, just the beauty and the geological spots there. There's just like so much to see, and it's so different. It's so amazing that I think that whole area and Wyoming, like, it's stunning and beautiful and peaceful, and really one of my favorite places on earth.
Definitely want to add that to my list. I have.
Oh, you have to go.
No, I have to go. And do you feel that your experience each time is different, even though you're going to the same place?
Absolutely, because because time of year makes a big difference. If you go in spring, there's not a lot of crowds, but there's also some places you can't go because it's still, the roads are still closed. So when you go in summer, a lot more people, but then there's a lot more things to experience and see. So any time of year you go is going to feel a little bit different, and any year you go, because it just changes there. And there might, like, you might be there, that's the day that one geyser goes off, and it hasn't gone off in 20 years. You never know. So
that's great. I love
yes.
So I definitely will put that on my list. So Susan, this has been such a pleasure. I just could talk to you all day and all night. So in closing, what advice would you give to a woman who's considering a career in technology?
First of all, yes, do it.
Mm-hmm.
But more specifically, and I said it before, is, may not be something that you even can consider anymore. When we think about that, what I was saying about all companies being tech companies, that if you're looking at a professional path, there's some kind of technical knowledge you need to have. And, and don't be intimidated by it and don't fear it. We can all be in technology. And so, consider that you're at some point kind of needing to be in tech.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But then I also think, don't think of tech as just being a software engineer. Like it's something that always interests me, that I think, like, when we say women in tech, there's so many different ways to be in tech. I mentioned, like, I've sold software, I've implemented software, I've designed experiences in software. There's a lot of ways to be involved in tech that don't require coding or, cybersecurity or, QA or something like that. So think of where your superpowers are and how you can apply it to tech in order to be in tech. I think we're going to need a lot more of those people than we are tech engineers or software engineers. And so those are the two main things that I would say, is that, um, don't exclude it, because you're not going to have that opportunity for much longer.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And, mentioning not every job is a coding job, so tech has so much variety, and there's, like you said, everything is going to revolve around tech. So think about where your passion is, your superpower is, and go for it.
I think you're an example, right? Like, your training in tech, that is one of the most important parts of this. And that's a way to be in tech, is to help others use it better.
Use it.
I think you're a perfect example.
Thanks. That's great. So, Susan, in closing, can you share with our listeners how they can get a hold of you?
Sure. You can reach me on my website. We didn't talk much about my company, Spinderock, but you can reach me on spinderock.com. You can also feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm assuming that might be something that you post, Jennifer. So yeah,
we'll put
as opposed to me saying it. Okay.
Yes, into the notes, the show notes, and so people will have that link so they can access it, both to your LinkedIn profile as well as that.
Okay.
Great.
Perfect.
Well, thank you, Susan. This was such a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show.
Likewise.
Having you hopefully in the future again.
I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Tech in the Right Direction. Please take a minute to subscribe or follow so that you never miss an episode. Also, don't forget to like, share, and comment. Thank you. See you next week.
From IT skill enhancements to end user adoption training, Directions Training is your resource to help optimize the effectiveness of your technology investments. Over 500,000 students have taken advantage of our wide selection of technology and business training solutions, covering the most popular applications today, such as Microsoft 365, Azure, Windows 10, and more. As a podcast listener, we invite you to take advantage of an exclusive offer. Receive 30 days of free access to our Microsoft official curriculum, on-demand courses for IT professionals or end users. Visit us at www.directionstraining.com/podcast to claim this offer today. Hurry, this offer is only available for a limited time. Success is a journey. Ask for directions.